What's happening? Welcome to the new episode of the Slapstream with Djordje live from Slapsville. I'm always excited about my guests and about this one as well. You know, I found out about my guest tonight, like when I was a kid and I was reading Bass Player magazine, and you know, I'm going to tell this story later on, but this is actually the first time that I'm able to talk to him in person. We've been in touch over the years, like through Facebook and stuff, but this is the first time officially. So basically, everything that I'm gonna find out about him, I mean, from his live interview, it's gonna be at the exact same time when you're gonna find out about him. So I'm excited about that. And before I introduce him, I would like to remind you to subscribe to my channel, to my Slap Bass channel, so you can find out not only about my musical adventures, but also about all these amazing bass players that I think that deserve to be very well known, like all over the world. So I'm doing my efforts. So your effort should be to subscribe and slap that like button, and share these videos. You know, so far there's more than 40 episodes. So I think you can find some knowledge, and lots of bass players all over the world should know about all these amazing players. Before we start, I would like to give a shout out to all the Patreons on my Patreon. So if you would like to support the channel and support my work, please go to my Patreon, and there's like, I offer all kinds of tiers, and you know, from Slapstream shout outs to Slapsville passports to lessons. So if you're into any of that, please check out Patreon. And if you'd like to donate, there's Venmo and PayPal links in the description of the video. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest for today. That's SMILIN Jay McDOWELL.
Hello.
Hey. How's it going?
Great. I'm so glad to be here.
Welcome to Slapsville. I'm glad that you're here. How have you been doing during these crazy times? You know,
well,
year without music, kind of.
Yeah. Well, I will say that I have turned to music more than ever, with the shutdown being such a big part of it. Although I can't perform as much, and really the sessions kind of stopped, I really did kind of turn to my own record collection and really kind of rediscovered a lot of music in this time. And it's funny hearing your intro there. I feel like I've known you for years, I guess just through social media, but I feel like you're an old friend. So good to see you.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I know you since that Bass Player magazine article, which is a long time ago.
That is a while back, yes.
How are things in Nashville? Are the gigs coming back?
Starting to. Everybody's you know, kind of dipping a toe in the water, if you will. You know, cautiously optimistic, but things are starting to loosen up a little bit. I guess the main thing is nobody's heading out on the road yet. You know, there's local shows here and there that are starting to pop up, but I think until people can freely tour again, I feel like it's still going to be kind of you know, a stranglehold. But cautiously optimistic is the way I'd put it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Here in Los Angeles, not much change. We're still kind of in a lockdown, but we're moving forward. You know, more and more people are vaccinated, so hopefully, right, you know, music going to be back soon in one way or another.
Yeah, I think mentally we're kind of in the same place. We're preparing for it, but it's not there yet. But we can all see it coming, I think, and
yes,
kind of have that hopefulness. But it's been a real experience for all of us, and you know, it's made us reassess a lot of things, and it's, you know, it's not all bad, but it is definitely interesting times.
Oh yeah, interesting, challenging, and we all need music back as soon as possible.
Right.
To keep our sanity. I would like to talk about your beginnings at the beginning of the show. So, can you please let us know, how did you start? How did you discover music? I know that music is basically the main part of your life, not just as a musician. So, I would like to hear what was the thing that kind of sparked the interest in you, and then how did you decided to be a musician and a bass player?
Sure. Started out listening to music, my parents' music, like most kids, discovering that you could go backwards and learn, and it was a porthole into this other world. Learning that the Beatles didn't make up everything that they sang about, that they were drawing from music from their past. Digging backwards through old records and finding other things. Buddy Holly and the Crickets were a huge start for me. Learning that I could pick up a guitar and my father could show me a few chords, and with relatively little work, I could bash out a Buddy Holly song, and that kind of opened my eyes to that. And so definitely started with guitar, played saxophone in school band, wanted a drum set, got into drums, just started kind of learning that how things fit together, and how learning a song on the piano is different than learning a song on guitar, which is completely different than learning a song on a saxophone, and how they work together. But growing up, I would play electric bass occasionally, but never the upright bass. It wasn't until I moved to Nashville that I was in a band playing guitar and looking for an upright bass player. There just weren't hardly anybody. You know, the only people that we could find in Nashville that played upright bass had steady gigs. Dave Rowe, who I know has been on your show, Mark Winchester, Preston Rumbaugh, they all had good steady gigs playing bass, and they didn't want to join my band. And so my journey to the stand-up bass came out of necessity. These guys that I met playing downtown for tips were playing music I loved. It spoke to me. It was classic country and rockabilly and gospel and just a cross-section of Americana music. They started asking me if I knew any upright bass players. And I said, me. I didn't have a bass. I didn't own a bass. I just jumped in and said, you know, I loved what they were doing musically. And I was confident enough that I could, you know, I could fake it. I said, let me get a bass. Give me 2 weeks. If it's not working, we'll part ways. No hard feelings. We'll keep looking for another bass player for you guys. But that was my entry into stand-up bass. So I was already 25 years old. Like I said, I had the musical background. I knew the tunes they were playing. I just had never physically played an upright.
So are the band that you're talking about, is that what became BR5-49 or?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So that band was your first band where you actually played upright bass?
Exactly. Yes.
That's amazing.
And
I mean,
I will say this: the interesting thing about BR5-49 was our drummer had always played drums.
Mm-hmm.
Our lead guitar player had been a rhythm guitar player before. Our steel player always played fiddle. Our acoustic player had typically played electric bass. Like, we were all kind of new to our individual spots. The drummer, he was always a drummer, but it kind of all just magically meshed. We were all kind of new to the instrument. We were finding our way, and something clicked, and it was just right.
It definitely did. You know, you guys had such amazing energy, and it was kind of different at that time, like from any other country music act. You had that kind of driving force, and with slap and everything. I loved it from the first time I heard it back home in Serbia.
Oh.
Did you as far as bass goes, I mean, other instruments too, did you have any formal education at all?
I took lessons on, well, I took drum lessons. I took in school, school band, you know, with reading music and things like that. So yeah, I had lessons. Now, when I got out of school, I became a guitar teacher at the local guitar shop, and that made me really have to, you know, buckle down and learn the theory and pay attention to that stuff. So I learned formally in that regard. As far as the bass, what was really interesting was getting an upright bass and joining this band. I started going around to friends, Dave Rowe, Mark Winchester, these people to ask them for advice. And what I kept hearing from every bass player was, I don't know what the right way to do this is, but this is what I do. And the more I heard that, I realized there's not a right way or a proper way for playing slap bass. So I turned to my record collection. Marshall Lytle of the Comets, huge influence. Hearing those 50s rock and roll records, I'd grown up listening to what the guitar player was doing and thinking about the guitar, the guitar, the guitar. So rediscovering my own records was eye-opening. To hear Johnny Cash records, the old Sun records, thinking about what the bass was doing with the drum, and how they were interplaying. And Buddy Holly records, although the Buddy Holly records weren't as strong in the bass department, you couldn't really hear what was going on as much. They were a little less defined. But those Comets records are so good. And I've heard in some of your shows on these Slapstream shows about talking about the two different micings of the Marshall's bass, with a mic on the neck to get the slap and a mic maybe at the sound hole to get the definition, because those records have really strong high end. You hear the clicking of the neck and really full bass that you hear the pluck of the string at the same time. And that really comes through in those records. And you put a Bill Haley and the Comets record on, and the bass just seems to just jump out at you. And we're talking something recorded 70 years ago that can still thump in my car, and it sounds great. So that was really exciting to kind of rediscover my own records, listening as a bass player. Now, we weren't limited to just 50s rock and roll stuff. We were doing old country stuff. We would do Charlie Pride songs, Buck Owen songs, Conway Twitty songs that were typically electric bass. But I always wanted to play upright for BR5-49. I would play electric on the recordings to double it with the upright, but playing live, I always wanted it to be an upright bass. As much of a headache as that caused traveling, as you know, traveling with an upright bass is not easy.
Yeah.
But I really felt like that was vital, and the rest of the guys in the band did too. It was a big part of the music. Even if we were doing a song like "Act Naturally" comes to mind, that you can play it on upright bass, and I certainly did. But if you listen to the recording of it, it's typically, you know, the Buckaroos are playing electric bass, and I see why everybody switched to electric when they did, because trying to travel with it and fly with it, it's a headache for sure.
Yeah, that's always a discussion. Are you going to bring the real thing, look cooler, or, and, you know, jump on it that like we all do and did, and or like you're just going to do an electric, you know? There was only one band in my career that I had to play electric kind of 90% of the time, and that's how I got money to move to the States, you know, just playing electric for a year, 5 nights a week.
Right.
It was completely something different. But I'm glad you're mentioning all these influences, and then I'm glad you mentioned Buddy Holly, especially since he had like a few bass players, Joe Malden being the most famous, I guess. But I think that the only slap player that he ever had was Don Gas.
Right.
And I like that story. I'm mentioning him because we were talking about electric and bass. Apparently, Buddy Holly was cool if the bass players brings electric bass on tour, but he always insisted on upright bass on the recordings. And that always was kind of like interesting to me because his songs from all these 50s guys are kind of the most pop. And I can hear those songs with electric bass kind of more than, you know, if you're listening to Johnny Burnett or somebody like that. And it's interesting that he was insisting on upright bass.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to play on a Crickets record because Joe B. It was a song. It was in the mid '90s, and it was a slap bass song, and Joe B. was real straight up. He said I don't do that slap stuff, you know, and so they asked me to come in and play on it, and I did, and so I was lucky enough to play with the Crickets for that exact reason. And it was an album called Too Much Monday Morning, I think, and it was funny to me was I went into the studio and I set up and I was getting ready and they pulled up the song and I was just playing along to warm my fingers up, getting ready. And the song ended and I was like, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this. And the producer, Stuart Coleman, hit the talk back and he said, no, I think we got it. And I was just warming up. I was thinking that was, and I realized in hindsight that was brilliant because I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't nervous. I was just getting, you know, it was a simple 1-4-5 song, but we listened back to it and he said, are you good with that? And I said, yeah, it's great. So that was my experience. We got to do I did some hand claps on a few of the other songs, but I really was just playing bass on that one song. But that was such a bucket list thing for me to play on a Crickets record and get to meet those guys. But like you mentioned, Don Guest, playing upright on those, especially those earlier Nashville sessions. I know he came. It's interesting to dig into the Crickets history and the different musicians that played on the different sessions and whether it was Nashville or Clovis or New York or wherever they recorded. I love learning about that stuff and hearing the old stories from those guys. And especially when the stories don't always jive up, there's some things that contradict each other. As I always say, there's 7 sides to every story, right?
Yeah.
So that was a big thrill for me to get to do that session.
That's amazing. I didn't know that you did that session. That's so cool. I mean, playing with those guys from the 50s, it's always something special. I haven't done that in a while, but I was doing that like 10 years ago, kind of often when I was playing with Dick Dickerson.
Oh, sure.
And
Jerry Allison gave me the best compliment I could ever in my whole life. He said to me, he was introducing me to Don Everly, to drop a name. He said, "This is Jay. He should have been born in 1940 because he would have hung out with us back when we were running around." And I just melted when he said that. I was like, "That's the coolest thing anybody's ever said to or about me."
Absolutely.
So that was a big deal for me.
Oh yeah, I can I can imagine. That's so cool. So I assume you were already in BR5-49 at that time, right? That was
yes,
mid 90s or so.
Yeah, we had played the producer Stuart Coleman. He was a bass player as well from England. Had moved to Nashville and was producing that record. And he had come to see us at a show. I think we were maybe playing with Jason and the Scorchers that night, maybe. But my phone rang and this British accent comes on. And he says, "I'd like you to play on this Crickets record." I'm A, thinking that I'm being pranked, that it's somebody else. B, then I'm saying, "Hey, I just started playing bass, you know, like 5 months ago. Like I can find you a better bass player." And Stuart said, No, we want you. You know, I saw you the other night, and you'll do for exactly what we need for this. So he encouraged me. I tried to be upfront about it, and now I would say yes. I'm there. Where do you want me? But in that moment, I was hesitant because I was new to the bass. But in hindsight, I'm really glad that it worked out. So.
Absolutely. And there's something about, I mean, which often those like 50s records have, when you have a bass player, or not just bass player, musicians that are kind of like more energetic, but not super advanced on the instrument. It's for some reason it sounds cooler than, you know, you have like polished studio musicians. And it's like, ah.
Well, think about, you and I grew up with all of that already out there. We have the disadvantage, or maybe it's an advantage, but
yeah,
we grew up knowing those records, hearing what Little Richard had already done, hearing what the Comets had done, hearing what Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps had done. Think about those guys taking on this. There were no rules. There was nothing was already in place. Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps made it up. How did they do that? How did they know to do that? How did Elvis and those guys go into the studio and stumble onto all that stuff? It's mind-blowing. So, like you say, the energy and the rawness and the newness of it is what still speaks to us today. We're still trying to tap into that all these years later. I can't speak for you, but I'm 51 years old. I'm no teenager. But when I put on a Carl Perkins record, it takes me back to being a teenager. And, you know, an Eddie Cochran record can do the same thing. And I feel like that's part of what we're all chasing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I think that, you know, rockabilly and that particular part of type of rock and roll needs like some fresh blood and some fresh ideas, and then somebody who's not afraid to try things. Because nowadays rockabilly bands and like a 50s rock and roll bands just try to copy that, and then kind of like loses the essence of what you said, newness. You know, like there's nothing new. You're just trying to copy it, and then it's just more polished. So this way, I was like, you know, I don't know. They're like other music styles.
I'll bring up the Stray Cats right there. The Stray Cats coming along when they did, being younger, bringing that attitude. They were tapped into that power, but they did have something extra.
Absolutely.
And those bands of that era, whether it's the Rockettes or the Polecats or Matchbox or those kind of acts, Whirlwind, those kind of acts that were bringing something new to the table. They may have been just trying to copy those old records, maybe, but being younger, you know, when I was growing up, if I went to see Chuck Berry, it was exciting, but he was still 65 years old, you know, at the time. It wasn't going to be the same as seeing Chuck Berry when he was 25. So yes, I want to see younger acts add their own thing to it. I want to see elements of different music mixed in there. I want to see things, you know, a postmodern. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you mix different types of music and put them together. That's where the magic happens. You take different types of music. That's where rock and roll happened. Taking rhythm and blues and country and pushing it together, and this is what comes out. That's also where it can fail miserably. You take different types of music and put it together, and it can just be terrible. But that has to happen. There has to be people pushing the boundaries and pushing the limits of every style of music. That has to continue.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I want to see rockabilly bands like the ones that are taking risks.
Right.
And they know that, you know, they're not going to be accepted, you know, from big part of the scene, but you still do what you want to do. You want to, you know, you want to take a chance. It's one life. Come on.
Right. And with me growing up in a little town, you were in Serbia?
Yeah.
So you can relate to that too, that you're in a different place from where all this happened. And the idea that I grew up in a little town here in the middle of America in Indiana, and finding other people out there in the world that love the same stuff. It was heartbreaking to find out that there were cliques and people that were snobby about it. And, oh, that's not you know, I was hearing some music that had a little twang to it, and I was turned on. And this is amazing. I'm finding these other musicians that are into this, and it's great. And I was turned on by it. And then to find out that there are people that were snobby and oh, I don't like this band because they have drums, or I don't like this band because they have electric bass, or whatever, was so heartbreaking to like, I didn't have anybody that agreed with me or felt the same way about this. To find out that there are people that are above it all because of some little thing that wasn't right was maddening to me. Absolutely.
I'm glad you mentioned the Stray Cats, and I wanted to ask you about something. So I see you kind of like, as far as my understanding go, like that you kind of started from rockabilly, you know, 50s, and equally kind of as 80s, and then got into country music. And then, you know, when I saw you wearing a drape coat back in those days, in US, nobody was doing that, right?
Right. And it didn't have any kind of stigma in the US. If I wore a drape jacket, it was just exotic looking. If I did that over in Europe or England especially, it was like I was putting on it was like I was standing for something that was, you know, the teddy boy culture was a thing that wasn't really happening here in the States. So I definitely was exposed to that in America. Now, the Stray Cats were, we talked earlier about the idea of playing an upright bass and traveling with an upright bass. Seeing the Stray Cats live was amazing. And to have an upright bass player, that was something that was a big part of their image and obviously a key part of their thing. But I never imagined Lee Rocker having to figure out the logistics and flying his bass and getting it to the next town. You know, that's something you don't think about. We see them on MTV, or you see a live show, and then they're gone to the next town. And it's not something as a fan that you even consider. So seeing the Stray Cats was a really cool eye-opener to me musically. Again, they're tapping into music before them, their influences, turning me on to things. I touched earlier on the Beatles and how kind of working backwards. So I come to Nashville from that angle. I meet up with the guys that are in BR5-49. One of those guys really came from a gospel thing and had worked back to the same rootsy, you know, finding everything kind of leads back to Hank Sr., I feel like, in our situation. Of course, Chuck Mead was the other singer that it was a little more coming from my angle as well, from punk rock and rockabilly. Donnie in the band was more coming from the square dance side of things. He'd worked his way back into old-timey country through that route. So again, we had these overlaps. We were all coming at it from different directions, but ending up in the same place and turning each other on to music. I learned a lot of gospel music from Gary and you know, old fiddle tunes from Donnie and things that weren't on my radar as I was growing up. So that was really exciting to see where things overlapped.
It was kind of obvious that even you guys played country music, that you had like a different influences. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and there's to where we were playing tips downtown in Nashville, you have this aesthetic that the DIY thing, you know, the punk rock side of things. And it's fascinating to dig into the music and see where Hank Sr. had some of that punk rock thing. Even though you wouldn't listen to punk rock and Hank Sr. and say it's the same thing, you can pick it apart and find things that overlap, and that's fascinating to me. And things from different types of music where there is a crossover. And BR5-49, that was one of our strengths for sure. Was that we were kind of it was hard to peg what we were. People ask, what kind of music are you? And I would always just say, we're traditional country. That's a catch-all. But
absolutely, yeah.
but we had our hands in a lot of different baskets, you know.
I think that's why, you know, people loved you, and because of that energy, and everybody was excellent musician, good songs, good
we
songs.
were young, yeah. We were up for traveling and having a good time and bringing the party. You know, we traveled a lot and played constantly, and we were always trying to get better musically. That was the main goal. It wasn't about dressing up and putting on. I mean, we put on a show, yes, but the goal was constantly getting better at our instruments and pushing the boundaries of our music. That was the shared vision of all 5 of us.
How many years have you spent in the band?
Well, we started, I guess, in '95, and about 2002 is when I was done with the road and stepped out. And they went on another couple of years, but so yeah, about 5 or 6, 7 years, I guess.
And the main reason, like, you stopped playing with the band was the touring schedule.
Yeah, it just got too much. It was so much fun. It was great. And then when 9/11 happened, we were on the road, and that day it was just kind of it hit me that I wanted to start a family and be home, and we still had. I still had commitments for another year, basically, with the band, and I honored those. And it was a friendly split, but then it was just like, okay, I need to. And now I have 3 kids, and I stay in Nashville. So
nice. And Jeff Firebow came out right after you, right?
Yeah.
Band.
Jeff was. What's that?
And Chris Scruggs.
Yes. Yeah, which is great because Jeff had been playing in bands around Nashville as a guitarist also. He had come up, I had known him, and we had a lot of similar interests, and we're good friends. And same as me, when it came, he was frustrated trying to find an upright bass player, so he got an upright bass and started playing. And then when it was time for me to step out, he stepped in. Chris Scruggs had been playing down on Broadway, and when we were on the road, I was playing bass with him, and he was, just a teenager at the time. He was 16, 17 years old, still in high school. But we knew he was a really strong force. And so I was really glad that those guys stepped in and they were able to keep going because, like I said, Gary and I got to the point where it was just too much travel and wanted to step out. But at the same time, it was like, well, if we quit, we're cutting off these guys' income. And, it was painful it wasn't just a matter of me saying, okay, I quit, I'm done. That was like, okay, well, what are the other guys going to do? And finding Jeff and Chris allowed them to go on and do another record or 2. So I was really happy about that. And like I said, it was friendly and it was good. And they were good guys, and I really enjoyed them. And I worked with them on some of the video work that they did, so I could stay home and still do video stuff for the band. So I was really glad that they got Jeff and Chris.
That's great. I hope to get, Chris is bass player too. So
yeah.
Well, I hope to get both of them at the show. I'm sure that they have lots of stories themselves. What would you say was the highlight of the band while you were in it? In general.
There's not one, but the idea that we started as a band playing for tips, there were no expectations past that. I mean, sure, you can say, oh, we want to put out a record and get on all the TV shows, that kind of thing. That just wasn't really realistic to us. We weren't looking at it like that. We were looking at it like we're going to play the music that we love, that we grew up loving, and our own songs in that style. And we're getting away with something. We're playing for tips. We're playing downtown Nashville. When I moved to Nashville and I went downtown, it was pathetic. It was sad that it was run down and seedy and not what I expected. I came to Nashville thinking I'm going to meet all these like-minded people that love this music. And when I showed up down there, it was not that. It was songwriters kind of trying to get their songs heard, but it was just like single guys with an acoustic guitar. There was no show at all. It was all, here's a song I wrote, you know, the singer-songwriter thing. And there's a place for that, and that's strong in Nashville. But I came here looking for something that didn't exist. And it turns out that the other guys in BR5-49 were also looking for that and disappointed when they got here. So when we met up and found each other, it was like we were able to fill that hole. And we started playing for tips, playing what we love to play. All the stuff that came from that, getting a record deal, traveling, going on the road, being in magazines, that wasn't something that was realistic to us. That didn't seem like something that could happen. I think that's true of most people that find some success, that it's not what they expected to happen. You know, success comes in different ways. So one of my favorite things about our whole trip was just being able to play every night at a place called Roberts down on Broadway here in Nashville for the different tourists every night. And it was never boring. It was something different, crazy happened every night, whether it was big music stars that would show up or people would come and sit in with us and play with us. It was just really exciting. Then to get a record deal and make a record and go on the road did seem to happen really quickly. All of a sudden we were doing the late night TV shows and interviews and being in the paper and those kind of things. That was exciting to our families and our friends that could see it. As we traveled around and left Nashville, we started going all over the world, and that was exciting. But at the same time, it was like we had to miss out on our social life. You know, like all of our friends back in Nashville were still going on, and we had left and had gone. So getting to meet all of our idols was fascinating and amazing. We toured with Bob Dylan and the Black Crowes, and George Jones, did things with him. So that was really fulfilling to meet those people. And it just seemed like each day was something more fantastic than the last day. And what's going to happen today? It was just, it couldn't get my head around it even. But after, you know, like I said, it wears on you. After 5, 6, 7 years, it got to a point where I was done. Had to hang it up.
Tours can be exhausting for sure. There's nothing like that like touring, but it's definitely not for everyone, and we all get exhausted after years of touring. Well, maybe after this year of not touring, we are going to be excited to go back on the road.
Yeah, well, it'll make you appreciate things differently for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So besides BR5-49, you mentioned that you played with Crickets, but you played with lots of other people as well. Can you mention some of the names and share the experience?
Oh, sure. Well, I guess finding myself playing upright bass in Nashville, all of a sudden I'm on a short list. I come here as a guitar player and there's 10,000 guitarists. I get an upright bass and suddenly I get called for all kinds of sessions and music videos and commercial jingles and things. It really jumped up my income because I was getting called for things that, you know, I worked as a guitarist and I was good. I was confident. I felt good about myself, but getting the upright bass was that thing that kicked it into gear. I will say, like I said earlier about the crickets, I would get a call for something, and I would think, I'm not. That's over my head. I'm not comfortable doing that. And then I learned to just go in because, again, I would express those concerns to a producer, and they would say, "Hey, we don't have anybody else. Come on, we need you to, step up and do this." So I again learned to shut up and play and do my best, and things worked out. And that was the eye opener that I didn't see coming when I got the bass. I thought, oh, I'll try this out and see what happens. But did stuff with Alan Jackson, Dierks Bentley, would do jingles, Pizza Hut commercials, and these music bed liner things, licensing, needle drop things. If you're watching a movie or a TV show and they get in the car and they turn on the radio and there's some generic music in the background, typically they don't pay to license a hit song. It's cheaper for them to record something or license something that's pre-made, that's almost generic. So I would get a lot of those calls for the upright bass. And I will say the story of buying the first upright bass, I was under the gun. It wasn't like, oh, if I find an upright bass, I'll get it. I was like, I'm joining this band. I need an upright bass today. And I started calling around Nashville, and nobody had one. I say that. There were some that were, $8,500, something like that. That in my mind, like, I can't swing that. I was just a musician. I didn't have extra money laying around. I was looking for something more in the $2,000 range. Find an old used bass that I could try out just to join this band. I called my friend Mark Torstenson in Huntsville, Alabama, who's a great bass player. He didn't have anything available. I called Memphis. I called, just started looking up phone numbers and calling music stores, and spent a whole afternoon. Found one in Ciderville, Tennessee, which is close to Knoxville. Ciderville Music had an Englehart. It was $9.99. I remember Chuck drove me in his minivan, and I traded or sold a couple guitar amps that I had, and got the money together to get this bass. And we drove there and got it and came back, and I just started woodshedding, like I said, asking anybody I could that could show me things. Kevin Smith from High Noon also lived in Austin, Texas. Wasn't near me at the time, but as we traveled and played, he was a great help to me and gave me a lot of pointers, and really, still a dear friend. And he plays with Willie Nelson now, and electric and upright as well. But great source of information for me. And again, I was a sponge. I was soaking it up from every direction that I could and trying to figure out how to play through blisters on your fingers, taping my fingers up and trying different tricks and different things. And finally, it was just a matter of just playing through the pain. And I know most of your viewers that play upright can attest to that pain that we all feel on our right hand.
Yeah, that's something like if you play upright slap bass, you have to feel it. So you have to go through that pain, to achieve the sound. But which is cool. It's some people decide not to. So the ones that are dedicated, they succeed. I'm glad you mentioned Kevin. I actually interviewed him at the first episode of the Slapstream, and wanted to make sure that he's the one he's the first one, so that since he's been an influence to lots of younger people, but also people that they're same age as him or like even older. So, and it seems that in the 90s there were like not that many slap bass players. So I want to ask you, like, to compare situation in Nashville as far as slap players go, like back then and now. Were they like less people that played slap then than now, or it was kind of the same? More work, less work?
I get called a lot for it. So I think there's still a shortage here. I turn down anything that I have to travel for. I don't have the interest to go out and get on the road again. But I'll do local things. You know, it kind of allows me to take gigs that I want to take. Friends that I really like the music, you know, and that kind of thing. I can't say that there's necessarily more players now, but it is fascinating when I go down to Broadway now, and there's so many more clubs playing full band music down there now, and there's quite a few upright players. A lot of them play electric as well. So there's plenty of bands down there that have the electric bass going, but so I can't speak to that, but I know that there's still a short list. Like I said, I still get called a lot just because there just aren't that many options for the upright. But I think that's pretty universal. Is that, I mean, in LA, there can't be a long list in LA, is there?
It's definitely not a long list, but I'm always thinking, like, what is the demand? You know, how many actual like slap bass players you need in each town? So
right.
It seems that there's a demand for slap bass players in Nashville more than almost any other place.
I would assume so. Yeah.
So that's why Nashville was always interesting for me and still is. And I mean, I know that nowadays, I mean, there's Joe Fick, Mark Robertson, Jeff Farbo, Dave Rowe, Mark Winchester, Dennis Crouch also plays slap, Missy Raines. So there's like quite a few players. And
Mike Bob,
Mike Bob, I had him at a show as well. I'm not sure it's Jerry McCurry like in Nashville, but I know that he's around there, I think. Maybe I'm sure I missed, you know, a bunch of people, but like, was it in the 90s kind of the same, or was it less?
Oh, it was less than you just named. Yeah.
Okay. Now it seems a lot, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, it was Mark Winchester, who was with Emmylou, and Dave Rowe, who had the Johnny Cash gig. You know, those guys were sewn up. They were not interested in playing for tips downtown at the time. Dennis Crouch, I want to say he moved here later than that. I feel like I met him more in the 2000 range, maybe. But yeah, when he showed up, you know, he got a lot of work. And then, and again, Mike Bubb was around, but he was kind of always in the bluegrass world. He wasn't really on my radar as far as on the lower Broadway thing. I guess we crossed paths with him more with Del McCurry Band on the road, and met up with him more there. But then finding out that he was in Nashville and playing and in that scene, in the bluegrass scene. But there were bluegrass bands looking for upright players too. That I know that was always kind of a need. So yeah, I will say there were less in the 90s than now around Nashville.
For me, coming like from Europe, coming from Serbia, it was always amazing how bluegrass and country are completely two different scenes.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like, just like, how's this, you know, possible? I thought it was like kind of like the same. I mean, I see music, the whole music as one scene, but like, you know, dividing, you know, bluegrass and country was like one of those things that I kind of had to learn early on when I moved to San Francisco. There's like, oh, these are people usually do not mix. You can find some musicians that play both styles, but it's,
and you're right. Coming from your perspective, you're looking at it like you're all liking the same kind of thing. Why are you separated?
Yeah.
Why is it a difference? And I see that too. It's certain people that are really bluegrass it's got to be this exact thing. It can't go out, you know, can't stray from that. And I had the same reaction, like, really, that's what you're consumed with, you know. But I guess there's always going to be those people.
Oh yeah. You mentioned like some of your early bass influences, but I would like to hear if you remember, when was the first time that you actually heard slap bass and knew that was it?
Rock Around the Clock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now,
so definitely 50s rock and roll.
Yeah. So I remember there was a TV show called Happy Days, and they used the Rock Around the Clock as the theme, but they had re-recorded that in the 70s for this TV show with an electric bass, and it did not sound like the record that I knew. And I just remember thinking, what's wrong with that? It's something's wrong. It's not the same. And I get it now. Maybe they wanted to modernize it and bring it up to date a little bit, but to me, there's nothing better than the bass sound on Rock Around the Clock. That upright bass is just perfect. And so that's one that sticks in my mind of it's hard to imagine better sounds than the upright on those Bill Haley records. I say the early rock and roll Bill Haley records. I guess he was recording, you know, and had upright bass and some of the swing stuff in the 40s he was doing, but and some of that stuff is strong as well. But that Decca stuff that he was doing, just the bass just jumps out at you. It's so good.
Yeah, that sound is magical. I mean, so many people were drawn to that slap of Marshall Idol or Al Rex, which is interesting. Like nobody. I mean, maybe I can ask you this since you're a historian as well. I always notice that people mention Marshall Idol's name and then they associate him with Bill Haley, rightfully so, because he recorded the biggest hits like Rock Around the Clock. But before him, it was Al Rex who played in the same band those songs, and then after Marshall Idol left, Al Rex came back to the band. And for me, the sound of Al Rex's bass and Al Rex's slap bass is almost identical, like to Marshall Idol's. It's probably to the similar technique, to the similar basses that I played, strings and recording technique, and the same band. But you never hear Al Rex's name in when people talk about slap. So what's your take on it?
Well, again, they are fitting into a framework that, you know, they had a playbook. They had, you know, they kind of, I think once it worked, they stuck with it. Buddy Holly and those guys, I think, did the same thing. It's interesting. I mean, I guess looking back with hindsight, it all happened in such a short time. The rock and roll stuff, 56, 57, it's all booming. It seemed like by 58, 59, obviously a lot of electric basses coming into play. So things shifted and changed. And I guess like anything, you can find yourself out of fashion. You know, it suddenly wasn't, maybe it was square to have an upright bass at that time. And but again, with the Bill Haley stuff, I feel like they had that framework and it worked for them, so they stuck with it. So I would assume that the engineers and the producer would want to keep coming with what was working. So it makes sense to me that they would try to have the same kind of setup and same kind of sound. But you know, of course, then I guess Marshall went on to the Jody Mars. And at that point, I don't know if he went back with Bill Haley then, or I think it was kind of a split, wasn't it? Kind of
yeah, it was a split, and then
I think we're not doing that
already in 1955, and then Al Rex came back to the band. But for me, it was always kind of like if I listened to Saints Rock and Roll, for example, which Al Rex played, it sounds exactly the same as Marshall Idol's recordings. And then talking to people that played with both of them, they always praise Al Rex. I actually had a chance to talk to Al Rex like over the phone like 10 years ago. So,
wow.
And I wanted to ask him for an interview, but he was not interested. But I did interview Marshall Idol, and he answered over 50 questions for Art of Slap Bass website.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
And
he was in a hospital after his surgery. He answered 50 questions. So I asked him every single thing.
Wow.
So I thought it was like, it's valuable. That's why I want to document all these amazing players like you know, like this, all these stories, you know, because I don't know. I don't think that nobody else would do that.
Well, it's hard to, you ask somebody like that, you know, what bass did you use on this recording, or what did you do, or what studio was this in? And so many of them, you know, hey, that was so long ago. And I liken it to if you asked a auto mechanic, hey, which wrench did you use on that one car on that one Tuesday in 1961? They're not going to remember, you know. So I also get it when these older musicians don't remember. They didn't necessarily think they were making history. They were just doing a gig, and you know, it was exciting that they got to put a record out and travel and everything. Sure, but I don't think that they thought that you and I would give a darn 70 years later. So I am glad you're documenting that and getting some people's what they can remember and get it down. That's great.
Yeah, now I have to get all you while you're still young and remember everything.
Yeah.
People for years gonna have, you know, lots of information to study. And I'm stoked about this, you know, like, I mean, without the pandemic, I would not be able to do this, but, you know, every Saturday I'm basically talking to all these people that I admire, and then, you know, that I like, and that I think deserve like more recognition, and that I'm generally interested in all these stories. So my Saturday is a slapper day.
Good.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing that you mentioned, that how everything kind of switched to electric bass, including Marshall Idol, who was the epitome of slap in the 50s for sure. Who else from the 50s, especially in that rock and roll or country world, was an influence on you that you can?
The Johnny Burnett records, so Dorsey Burnett. I don't know if he was the bass player on the recordings or not. I don't know. I know there's talk of you know, different studio guys in some of those recordings, but certainly those Johnny Burnett records are big influences. Of course, Bob Moore here in Nashville, great studio session guy. I moved into a house in East Nashville in about 1998, and I had a flight case for my upright that I would travel with, a David Gage case, big white flight case, and it was sitting in my driveway as I was moving into this house, and I was getting stuff moved in, and I come out of my front door, and there's this old man standing by my bass case, and he's just standing there looking at it, and I just think, oh, this must be one of my neighbors. I walk up to him, and he said, "Son, is this yours?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You play bass?" And I said, "Yeah." And he introduced himself, and he was Bob Moore, and he had bought a house across the street and was fixing it up to sell it. So he wasn't living across the street from me, but he was working there. And that was just one of those Nashville moments to walk out of my front door, and there's Bob Moore standing at my bass. And so
the coolest neighbor.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So then fast forward, we did some gigs. He showed up at some shows we did, and got to know him, and really nice. And again, you know, I'd ask him for tips and pointers, and same thing. He'd say, "I don't know what the right way is, but here's what I do." And of course, you know, he played on so many hit records through the years. And I mean, a silly amount of hit records. And with the museum that I work at now, the Musicians Hall of Fame, that's exactly the kind of people that we really shine a light on. And so getting to meet him just randomly was definitely a Nashville moment. That was a cool thing to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I'm jealous. I want to run into one more. As far as you mentioned Johnny Burnett, and as far as I did a little bit research on that, and then as far as I could go, is that I found out that Bob Moore definitely played on those Nashville recordings of Johnny Burnett Trio, but probably not on all of them. I somehow got, like, I forgot, there was like long research, but I got a list from some like session lists or something, and then there was Dorsey and Bob. I haven't heard any other name that played on Johnny Burnett recordings, but I'm pretty sure that Dorsey played outside of, on those studio sessions outside of Nashville. Do you know anything more about it?
I know that it's smoky.
Okay.
In that regard, yes. And I guess I'll say that, like, about the Nashville guys playing on that stuff. When I grew up as a kid, finding those records, I took it at face value, like so many recordings that you find out later was session musicians. Wasn't necessarily the people that were pictured on the front of the record, but so. It doesn't. I guess when you ask, whoever's playing on those records were a big influence, whether it's Dorsey or Bob. But that was kind of where my brain went to Bob Moore. Who else growing up? Of course, Jack Neal with the Blue Caps. Again, the fact that they were mixing different styles of music and putting it all together. Without an existing framework blows my mind. That stuff is so strong. And again, it's, 18, 24 months, and then it's gone. Kind of, they kind of evaporate into, and morphed into a whole different style when they went out to California to record. But certainly those records, the Little Richard records, some of the Louis Jordan stuff a little bit earlier, the Timpani 5, that stuff is strong, big influence as well. And I guess I don't know, just hearing the Stray Cats and their take on it, was a huge eye opener as well.
And any other, like, a neo rockabilly bands like that you were into it? You seem, I always assumed that you were, since I guess because it's that draped jacket that you kind of like were aware of the Teddy Boy scene and the neo rockabilly scene and maybe psychobilly scene as well.
Yeah. Well, there was a band called the Planet Rockers here in Nashville. When I moved to Nashville in the early '90s, they had kind of already done their thing and put out a record, and Mark Winchester was the bass player, and he got the gig with Emmylou Harris and the Hot Band, and they were kind of put on the back burner. But I saw them perform. They kind of got back together and did a show here in Nashville, and that was an eye opener to I wish that they were happening. I wish I was here when they were really going strong. Christy Rose was singing at that time and doing with her band. But as far as the stuff from England, yeah, I was, again, just trying to get anything I could, find any of that stuff. Restless, Shakin' Stevens, just to be able to, like I said, living in the middle of the States, a million miles away from that stuff, to find out that these people still knew who Eddie Cochran were or Gene Vincent, and that they were still revered, definitely piqued my interest, and I wanted to dig into those records. Some of the psychobilly stuff, the Quakes, the Frantic Flintstones, again, finding that kind of music, Batmobile, the Jets. I remember hearing a Jets record and loving that. Again, just excited to find that there's other people in the world that are turned on by the same stuff. Because again, pre-internet, you're thinking that you're alone. None of my friends knew this stuff. Nobody knows this kind of music. Even the older American stuff they didn't care about. That was old hat to them. So such an eye opener to find somebody like Daryl Hyam that's my age that's championing this stuff. And now you can find it. It's a lot more out there. You can get on the internet and find a whole, your show and all these other bass players that talk about what turned them on. It's vital. But growing up without that, it was a real turn on to find these records. There was a band called the Crazy Cats that put out a record from Switzerland. I think they're Swiss, but they were in the 80s, and they're doing old Charlie Feathers songs and oldies, but cranked up, and they were young guys, and that was a exciting one to find. Then hearing Big Sandy and the Fly Right Boys. Here's people my age championing this music with steel guitar and TK Smith playing guitar, and to discover that there were these little pockets of people all over the world, it just suddenly, I didn't feel as alone.
That's great. It seems that it was super hard, like finding that 80s stuff, and then now you mentioned all these psychobilly bands, which is cool. Have you seen any of those bands live back then in the 80s or early 90s at all?
No, it was. I lived in Indiana, and I was not able to get to England until we were with BR5-49, and then we crossed paths with some of those people. But I was not able to see any of it live. We'd hear records here and there, and
imagining how did they look like. It's interesting. I heard the story from Paul Roman from the Quakes. The singer, he said that they were getting those psychobilly records from England, and that everything sounded so crazy, so they thought that all those shows were like super wild, and then that's how they based their own show, because they wanted to be super wild, so they went like over the top. So it was different than what was actually in reality.
Yeah,
but it's something about this music that it opens your imagination, and then you create your own world.
Right. Yeah, and I never wanted to only have a 50s car and surround myself in that kind of lifestyle. I'm fascinated by it, and I love that music, but I want to have a car that gets me to work. I never got caught up into that, and finding people that only wanted that lifestyle and only wanted old furniture and that was it's fine for them. It's just that was never my thing. I never looked at it as I never wanted to escape that much, I guess. But again, to find that there are other bands out there that are digging the same stuff was such an eye opener. So important.
Absolutely. Let's get back to your own thing. So you besides BR5-49 and the Crickets, how many other records have you recorded, like with bands and artists? Is there anything that you would especially mention?
Nothing. I did a thing with Barefoot Jerry recently. I say recently, in the last couple of years. Tommy Rowe called, and he had a lot of hits. Dizzy and Sweet Pea. He called looking for a bass player, and I was fortunate enough to go in the studio with him several times. It was a thing where his hits were coming up to be renewed, and he could sell them, re-recordings of them, and make all the money. So he re-recorded all of his hits and hired me to do that. So that's been exciting to get to work with him. And those are the last couple things that come to my mind.
Do you have any music planned soon, like to record, or any music projects?
Yeah, I have. I'm cooking up something with a couple friends, but I don't want to say it yet.
All right.
Yeah, always something going on. Yes.
So when people want to find out about your current projects and your future project, is it the best like to follow you on Facebook or any other social media?
Yeah, Facebook is probably the way to go. I'm on Twitter some, but more on Facebook than anything. Yeah.
All right, people. Here's the
hey, look at that.
Facebook, and yeah, exactly. And in the description of the video, you can also find his Instagram and Twitter. So make sure to follow him. Follow me as well. So if you haven't done that, and Art of Slap Bass as well. And we talked a little bit about people that you performed with as well. Do you have anything scheduled now that you can talk about, like, besides recording sessions, or like it's still secret, or you?
Well, yeah, and at this point, there's nothing live stuff's just not happening enough. So.
Nothing happening. Yeah, I can. Yeah,
nothing planned yet. No.
Do you write music?
I have. I don't actively pursue it, but I do. I always laugh about. I grew up considering myself a songwriter, and I moved to Nashville, and then kind of found that there's people that do it 24/7, and it kind of showed me that I'm not in that league, but I do enjoy it, so sure, but I don't actively pursue it.
Do you have any particular process like for writing? I like asking these bass players because some like start with a bass riff, but more people that are outside of the country and rockabilly scene, but like it's more like a bass riff, and then they build a song, or like a melody, chord progression.
Anything. Yeah. I typically start with a chord progression on a guitar. Typically, but like I said earlier, I touched on earlier, like it's fascinating to me how songs will fall out of different instruments different ways. Pick up a ukulele, you're gonna put something together that's gonna come off differently than if you're plunking around on a piano or a guitar or a bass. So I do love how certain things can come from that. Now, if I'm chasing a melody in my head and I'm finding it on different instruments, that's a different animal. But typically, I'll sit around with a guitar and start with a chord progression and go from that.
Do you ever teach music?
I do.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So still the best way like to get in touch with you is Facebook again?
Sure.
All right. So I'll do this again. So it's obvious if you want to get a lesson from SMILIN Jay,
sure.
Hit him up on Facebook. And you teach bass or you teach other instruments as well?
Bass and guitar, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. And how much time you even have, like, since you have a steady gig for a long time at a Musicians Hall of Fame.
Musicians Hall of Fame, yeah. So yeah, that's my day job. I work at Musicians Hall of Fame, and I'm an archivist there. So I deal with video and photos and exhibits. We honor all types of music. We're not just country, even though we're in Nashville. We have stuff from the Wrecking Crew. We have stuff from the Funk Brothers and Motown. We have stuff from Muscle Shoals, Stax Records, Sun Records, Philly. We got a whole Jimi Hendrix exhibit. There's a Johnny Cash section, a lot of his instruments and personal items that Johnny owned. And so, yes, that consumes me, and I really enjoy that job. With not traveling and playing music anymore, I was able to transition into doing music video work here in Nashville, and that led me to this museum when it started, doing video work for them, and So I still get to be in that world and dig into it and research and work on the music side of things there. So yeah, that is a full-time job. But I do also write, just not music, but I write a column for Now Dig, this magazine out of England. I would say that writing is therapy for me. I just sit down at the computer and start typing, and sometimes I will write about a specific thing, but a lot of times I just sit down and start typing, and it leads me to some memory that comes out. And like I said, with the stuff we did with BR5-49 on the road, we encountered so many things. I couldn't process it all. There are things that come up that I'll see a photo online, or somebody will mention something to me, and I'll be like, oh yeah, we worked with that person, or we did this TV show, or it's like something has to kick in a memory for me to happen sometimes. It's not just all, we just experience too much stuff. So that's something that I find therapeutic, is to start typing and to write things. And I post a lot of that stuff on social media as well, but that's something that I look to as a hobby as well.
I love your stories. Yeah. Any chance you might release something as a book? Even like a collection of all these stories would be amazing.
I will. I am working on that. People ask me every day, "Hey, are you writing a book?" And I always say, "Well, I'm writing it every day. It will have to be put together and come together." But yes, that will be happening down the road. Yes.
Okay, awesome, cool. That's another good reason for people to follow you and find out. Read all these stories and find out when the book gonna be released. I definitely wanna read it. And from all these years at the museum, is there any story that you can pick and share with us?
Well,
there's tons of them, but
yeah. So it's so great to meet these people that are just walking through the museum and hear their stories. They're music fans. Everybody has. I love how we all share things that we like. There's also other things that don't mean a darn to us. And walking through the museum, you can see somebody just lose it over this one particular item. They're standing there and they're moved to tears because it means so much to them, and they grew up listening to this certain singer or the certain song, and the person that walks up behind them can look at it and be like, "Yeah, it's a guitar, whatever," and it means nothing to them. And it blows my mind how that makes the world go around, that we all can. It's such a personal thing. It can mean so much to us individually about certain songs and certain types of music. I was standing in front of our Sun Records exhibit. We've got some of the old gear from Sun Records. And this older gentleman walked up, and we have this facade that is the copy of the old Memphis recording service with the neon lights that hung in the windows there. And this older gentleman said, I installed those. Now, I thought that we had hired him when we built the exhibit, that he installed the neon. And as he talked a little more, it hit me that, no, he installed the real neon at Sun Records. And he was from Mount Olive, Mississippi, which is just outside of Memphis. And he said right out of high school, he started working for this sign company in Memphis. And they put him in a truck, and he said, one of the first few months, he got called to go and install that neon for Sam Phillips. And those two neon signs that hang in those front windows of Sun, it hit me, are so iconic. And they show those pictures of the front of Sun Studios in documentaries and on old pictures and shows about Elvis and Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee Lewis and all that stuff. And the idea that, wow, somebody had to put that in. So I'm talking to him and getting him to tell me the story about it. And he points to the window of our museum at the right side. He said somebody threw a brick through the window or a big rock and broke the neon on the right side there in about 59 or 60. And he was called to go repair it. And he had to go repair the neon. And while he was on site there working on the neon sign, Sam Phillips said, "Hey, a friend of mine is looking for some work. Can I give him your number?" And so he did. And it was Elvis. And this guy went to Graceland and put some neon in for Elvis at Graceland. And he said, I put in did a lot of work on neon and other signs, but that was my most exciting thing, was getting to go to Graceland and work on that. And so I'm just blown away. This older man, his name was Elvis also. And I got my picture taken with him. And I just remember, he said, "Yeah," he said, "Elvis is not a common name." He said, when Elvis Presley came along, it was amazing to find out there was another Elvis. And of course, then he became a household name, and people thought that I was trying to copy him. But he said that was my given name. And I'm guessing he would be in his upper 80s by now. But that was probably about 6 or 7 years ago that happened. But things like that just happen in the museum that I just stumble upon. That who would have ever thought about it? That would happen.
Such a cool story. Such a cool story. I can't wait to come back to Nashville and then, visit the museum, visit you, and then,
please do.
See all those. That'll be so much fun. Since you've been in the music business basically since the early 90s, what would you say, what are the things that changed when you analyze the situation back then and now in music business in general?
Well, it seemed that when I showed up here, people were trying to get publishing deals, and that was something that was a common goal. That doesn't seem to be as common now. I'm sure there are companies that hire writers and give publishing deals, but they're just everything is tightened up music business wise. That seems to have constricted quite a bit. So I definitely feel that that's a difference. It's a different animal. When we were coming along, and like I said, we weren't, it wasn't realistic for us to get a record deal and go on the road. It happened, and seemingly out of the blue. But then I don't know. I do get asked often for advice for musicians. What should we do? And how did you do it? And I can't honestly say, well, here's what you need to do. I say, put your head down, do what you love. Don't try to chase what is the current fad in music. That won't get you anywhere. By the time, if you're chasing a fad, it's going to be gone by the time you get there. So do what you do well and give it all you got. And that's my best advice. I also say that if you are into country music, you need to be in Nashville. That is something I believe in. People say, hey, well, with the internet now, I can write songs and do it from wherever. That may be true, but I feel like you're going to get a lot further by being in the middle of everything physically and being here in Nashville. So that's the best advice I can give. And as far as how things have changed, the whole business has changed. It's that's no secret. It's a different animal than it was 25 years ago. But like I said, we didn't come to Nashville saying, well, we're going to be a country band and we're going to do this and we're going to make it that way. It just all kind of happened naturally, and we lucked into that. So I'm thankful for that.
That's the best when things happen naturally. Absolutely. Then if you have to plan something, and those plans never come the way that you planned exactly. So
Right.
you know, you have to be smart, but it's a. I like the advice that you gave, because I don't think that people realize that actually how important it is to have that in-person connection, and then how people basically choose musicians they want to hang out with and play with and tour with, basically some often more through their personality and not so much like about their skill level of playing. So
yeah, I
thing.
was not going to get the gig because of being an amazing bass player. I got the gig because I think I gelled personality wise. The guys were comfortable with me and saw that my heart was into it and that I was in it for the right reason. It wasn't like I showed up and wowed them with my bass skills. That was not the case. But yeah, that's a big part of it. The personal relationships, that's for sure. And I think that's true in any city. That's true anywhere.
I agree. If you can give an advice like to upcoming bass players, upcoming musicians, or anybody who wants to get a gig, who wants to get on the road, who wants to kind of start doing it, all that stuff that you were doing, what would be an advice, like how to discover like-minded people these days?
Yeah, well, you want to be where it is. So that's the thing. You want to find, in Nashville, you want to go to the open mic sessions and the writers' nights, and like I said, that's starting to open up again now, but it's still kind of locked down. But yeah, it's a small scene in Nashville as far as tight knit. You can kind of find out where the shows are, the people are hanging out, and it, same thing. If you do somebody wrong, it gets around quick. It's a small scene in that sense too. It's you can be kind of pushed out. I know some musicians that have taken a gig with a kind of a glossy country act, and they badmouthed them and kind of looked at it like, well, I'm just doing this gig this week to get this, this paycheck. And like, I'm really above this. I don't want to, and they kind of had that attitude, and suddenly they didn't get any gigs. They kind of got turned away because of their attitude wasn't right. And that was eye-opening to me that Nashville can be a really small town. And certainly relationships that I struck while I was in BR5-49 have helped me through the years. Things that people that worked at record labels or different venues, they're still out there working at other companies now and have other jobs. And I benefit from those relationships now from people that I never thought I'd see again. I never thought about it back then. And now I realize that, oh, I got this job now because of knowing that person 20 years ago. And that's, just treating people, common decency is the best medicine.
I love asking that question, especially the different generation, because when I ask people, kind of maybe like more people that are out of this scene, they would first thing that they would say like, oh, internet presence, like how much you're present on the internet would be something that is important to get a gig, especially if you're willing to move to opposite part of the world or the country in order to achieve that. But it's interesting to see the perspective from different generations. When I ask people from the 50s, they would usually say like, oh, ads in the music stores, stuff like that. And then thinking, yeah, that would not get you anywhere these days.
Right.
So it's
different world.
Yeah, it's a different world, definitely. Let's go back to your bass playing, your slap bass playing, and your influence and all of that. Besides rockabilly and country, would you say that you have bass influences from other music styles?
Sure.
And like anybody in particular?
Well, I'm constantly listening to all types of music. I'm always of the mind that something that I hear a half an hour from now could spin my head around. And there's so much music, whether it's current or from 80 years ago. There's such a wide range of stuff. There's so much music out there that we can't hear it all. And there's something beautiful about that. I own a whole lot of music, records, different formats, CDs, ways of listening to music. I can't listen to it all before I die. Yet I still will go to my record collection and pull out a record I've heard a million times. It's comforting. I want to put that, I need to hear this right now. And so I am constantly exposed to different things. I guess it's fascinating to me to hear music that's not upright bass, to hear a tuba and what it's doing and how they approach it. Again, just like writing a song on a different instrument is going to come out differently. Hearing a bass line that is generated on a different instrument is going to be a different bass line than the upright bass. Switching to upright bass from a guitar, one of the things Dave Rowe taught me was anytime you can use an open string, use the open string. Your tuning is going to be right that way. As a beginning bass player, that's a really important thing. That makes your bass line differently. You're playing differently than if you have total control over wherever you want to put your fingers. If you're going up the neck and it's harder to be in tune, you're going to be safer. And again, playing the simple country stuff that we were playing in BR5-49, it was a lot of 1-4-5 songs and nothing. It was nothing too fancy. The occasional flourishes into other jazzy things, but for the most part, I was playing open strings when I could play them. So hearing a jazz band, hearing a quartet, a string quartet that's coming from a whole different, what we'd consider a completely different style of music, can open my ears to different types of approaches to songs. And like we touched on earlier, pushing the boundaries of what we consider the basic rock and roll is where it's at. I want to have different approaches. It's not always going to work, and you know that going in. But if we only played the exact, if you and I played the exact same bass line on the exact same song, what's the point? We might as well just pull up a recording of it. We want to stretch it out and take risks and try different things. So that's really important to me. So I do draw from different styles of music and different approaches, and definitely put it in to that. You got to pick and choose your timing for that. You can't be way out there and doing a bunch of Les Claypool stuff behind. You got to serve the song. That's the most important thing. But also, I learned early on that my best friend was the drummer. Some of the, not stepping on what the drummer's doing and him letting me do my thing, with the slap of the bass. You got to work in tandem with the drummer. Some of the best reactions that I got from slap bass on recordings was due to our drummer locking in with me, and it wasn't all me doing everything that you hear. So I have to tip my hat to the drummer, but always being aware of that. Your musical surroundings is vital.
What would you say is the best representative of your slap bass playing on the record? Any record.
So on BR5-49's first studio album, we did a song called One Long Saturday Night that I was really proud of. I never was about doing a bass solo. That was never a thing. I never wanted to do, never wanted to do a bass solo in the shows. I would always joke that every song is a bass solo. But I was really proud of that particular song. There was a song called 18 Wheels on a Crowbar, which was on our second full-length album. And that one was interesting because it's all one chord. It's the key of A, and it doesn't change. And I tip my hat to Chuck as a songwriter for writing a song that's one chord, because it works. And so I just played 1/5 the whole time. So in a sense, it's not a fancy musical thing, but some of the best musical things aren't fancy. So that's one that I'm really proud of. And I don't know. Like I said, it was fun in the studio because I could stretch out. I would always double things on electric bass as well. I don't know. I wasn't involved with the mixing of the record, so there are times when I wonder if there's not both basses on the recording, that there might be more of one than the other. They always mic'd my bass right at the bridge and took the output, the direct out as well when we recorded. And I know the engineers, wanted to have that to kind of mix them. Like I said, I don't know necessarily how much they used of which input or which mic, but I always liked being able to stretch out in the studio that way, because that was the at a certain point you're playing live every day and it's exciting, and then you go in the studio and you get to be creative. And then you go on the road for a year and you're promoting the record and you're playing those songs. And then you get to go in the studio a year later. And it got, after, 3 or 4 times of that, it was exciting. But after 3 or 4 cycles of that, it was like, I didn't feel as creative. I was still, we're like, oh, we got to show up and be the party. We got to, we got to bring the show. And it was exciting to meet people and that was fun. But I definitely started to feel stifled as far as my creativity went with that. It started to be kind of a cycle.
And when you mentioned that interesting way of recording that you doubled upright bass with a bass guitar, whose idea was that? Were you the one that insisted on that, or you tried to achieve that sound?
Well, I had I can't say I insisted on it, but I definitely had read about Joy and Eddie and his records doing that, having the bass doubled when they were starting out, when they first had the electric bass. And he's another huge influence, Joy and Eddie. Those records, those early Joy and Eddie records are huge influences. And our producer, Mike Janis and Joseph Noyens, I just remember them. I don't know that it was their idea or my idea, but they were always on board for doubling the bass. And I think they looked at it too as just a backup too. But for the most part, I would do the same part on both. I would try to match it for the most part.
Back notes.
Yeah. But,
first time I heard about that particular technique is from one of Bob Moore's interviews that actually republished on Art of Slap Bass. The author gave me a permission. And he talked about Johnny Cash record that he did and played on it, but Joe Zinken played slap. I think the record's called Boom Chicka Boom. So there's like 2 basses happening at the same time. One is Bob Moore and one is Joe Zinken.
Nice.
And was it a kind of like the standard of recording at a certain point in Nashville? Because I never heard about that in any other city except Nashville.
Yeah. Only them talking about it in Phoenix there. But again, that Joy and Eddie stuff was later. That was 58, 59, 60. So the electric bass had come along and, but they were still wanting to use the upright in the studio. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I'm sure Phil Spector was doubling basses on some of that Wall of Sound stuff. So I'm sure that was happening. And yeah, but yeah, Bob Moore and like Harold Bradley playing the 6-string bass along, the tack bass with it. Was definitely a Nashville thing. And yeah, I'm sure if we dig, our listeners here can chime in and let us know what they know. But was Connie Guybo Smith in your interview? Was he saying that they doubled that sometimes too, or am I imagining that?
I forgot the details, but I don't remember him saying that they doubled it. But
it was just one or the other kind of thing.
I think so. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. It was cool. Like it was really cool interviewing him, and then he was all up for it, and took a bit of organization, but he was great. And it was cool hearing from him that when he was using capo on the bass guitar.
I know it. I never suspected that either. I think I made the same face you made when he said that when I was watching that interview. Like, really, a capo?
Yeah.
And you said on the recordings even, he said, yeah, for sure. So who'd have thunk? Who'd have thunk?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's one of those being able to hear. He's a good example of when you ask him specific questions and he's like, I don't know what kind of strings. I don't know what I played on that, or that was years ago, and he wasn't thinking that there'd be kids our age that gave a darn, But I really enjoyed that, and it was great. And I was glad that Marilyn was on there with him too. That was cool.
Yeah, they were really cool. I met him a couple of years ago, and then we stayed in touch, and made it happen.
Cool.
Since we're talking about all these bass players, so what would you say are the most essential slap bass recordings, not yours, like from the people that you like, that you can point out, and then maybe people can try to find those recordings and
Kevin Smith,
real thing.
Kevin Smith, for sure. I really enjoy hearing the stuff that he does. I like the Daryl Hyam records. A lot of times he's got good slap bass on his records, on not just the Eddie Cochran songs that he does, but some of his albums. Who else? Wally Hersom comes to mind with Big Sandy and those guys. I guess he's not their bass player now, but on some of those 90s recordings that he was playing. Of course, Deke Dickerson's always got a good bass player. Tiger Army. But Joe Fick. I met Joe Fick in Seattle, Washington. He was playing with Paul Burleson, and we did a show with him, and he was just a kid at the time. I remember feeling like he was a teenager maybe, but I guess we were all pretty young. But then he moved to Nashville, and I started seeing him around town here, and so he's always solid. The legendary Shack Shakers, Mark Robertson plays with them, and they're always solid. And again, that's a little more revved up, and if you know legendary Shack Shakers, but they've got it cranked up for sure. Lots of energy, but that he's one for sure, and gosh, there's a lot of good ones. Of course I'll leave 50 out if I try to name them, but
yes, absolutely. I love legendary Shack Shakers, and I've seen them a couple times, and first time was with Mark Robertson, and I think that's when I met Mark, and it was a Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival in San Francisco.
Nice.
And that was a really fun one. And then later on, I seen them. He was already out of the band, and then he didn't play. But I hope to get him on the show as well.
Yeah.
So as far as your setup like on bass? What are the, I want to hear, what are the basses that you use, strings, all of that? I'm
Sure.
not the best gearhead, but I know that people love this part. So
Yeah. So this bass behind me is a K. I'd say it's a late 50s K. Just a basic plywood bass, nothing fancy. The very first bass I got is was an Englehart that I used on the first records. That one is in the Musicians Hall of Fame in an exhibit now. This one behind me, I got after the Englehart had broken down a few times on the road, and it was always the fingerboard would always have to get planed, and it would get grooved, and I'd get new fingerboards, and just we were playing so much it was really wearing out. So I got this one. I use 2 steel strings and 2 silver wrapped gut strings from Perastro. The E and the A I use steel, and the D and the G is the silver wound gut. I've been real happy with those. Like everything, it's expensive, as you upright bass players know. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know already. Strings are expensive. Everything about the upright bass is expensive. When we were traveling and playing with BR5-49, I had to deal with Ampeg, and they always gave me amps. And back then it was heavy, big, had to have the heavy cabinets and the, to move all the air. Since then, I have downsized to just an acoustic. The brand is acoustic amp, much smaller, and blows my mind how lightweight it is and easy it is to carry. You don't need a truck to move my amp anymore. I use a bridge pickup that was made by George Chestnut. He was my bass guy here in Nashville. He passed away a few years back, but he put the pickup in my bridge for this bass here. So it's direct out. I experimented with different microphones on the fingerboard through the years, and running 2 lines out of the bass, and tried different things on the road, but ultimately ended up just using the single line out of the bass for live shows into the amp and to the PA. Now, when we were playing in the bigger places, I didn't even need the amp. We would just go direct. I would always have an amp on stage, I guess, for the band. We always played really low volume in BR5-49. That was something I was really happy about, was I wasn't fighting, rock and roll stage levels. Everybody played at a much lower volume, so I was able to deal with that. But typically, just going direct into the PA and letting the sound guy do what he wanted with it. I'm not always chasing different types of tones. Just the line out of the bass into the amp. If it sounds like the bass, I'm happy. I'm not trying to rev it up or do anything crazy with it.
Do you ever have a problem with feedback? I mean, especially back then when you had to play huge places.
No, because the band always had low stage volume. So I was really fortunate. I would meet other bass players that would play in other bands that would have trouble with that, but I never did. Never did have trouble with that. We always played so low. I just would get a little snare drum in my wedge from a monitor, and a little bit of my bass in there. I could hear the fiddle and the steel and the guitars just in the room. I didn't need any of that to monitor. As long as I could hear what the vocalists were doing, I was good to go.
Interesting. And any pedals or any effects? Were you using any of that?
Nope.
No, nothing. Okay.
These effects right here.
those are the main effects.
Yeah, I was same with the guitar player growing up. I was never chasing tone. Give me an amp and turn it up, and I'm ready. I'm not picky about any of that stuff.
No, that's the best way. At least like for this music style, definitely.
Yeah.
How do you like to record your upright bass? Do you have like a special placement of the microphones? What kind of microphones, or like a?
I know that in the studio with BR5-49, we always used a Neumann. I couldn't tell you what, if it was I couldn't tell you the number of it, but it was a Neumann mic, a ribbon mic, and we had the best results putting it 6 inches from the bridge, straight in the middle. We didn't mic the sound hole. We mic'd right in front of the bridge, about 6 inches away. And like I said, and then I would run the bridge pickup that is built into the bass. I'd run that out as well to the board. But that was what we came up with and stuck with. So typically, if I go into sessions now, I'll start with that. If they want to monkey with it and change, occasionally in sessions a producer or an engineer will try different things, and that's fine. But typically that's where I start.
Did you ever have problems like with band leaders telling you, hey, can you slap a little more, or can you like not slap at all? I hear often, like, especially from bluegrass bass players, like, do not slap, or like, with psychobilly people, slap all the time. Only were you able to find something in the middle, or you had like some kind of directions?
It was between me and the drummer. I will say that it was never a band leader. It was never one of the singers saying, "Oh, don't do that." They might show me a bass line and, here's a song we're working on and it's got this kind of feel to it, and kind of steer me in that direction. But it was always me and the drummer working out. Hey, if I'm slapping, is that going to step on what you're doing? And thinking about it in those terms, because I wanted the drummer to enhance. Again, that's the secret to a good bass player, is having a good drummer. So definitely wanted to work with him in that regard. But no, I never felt like I was being pushed either direction to slap more or slap less. I wasn't real showy. I was more of a meat and potatoes bass player. I wasn't. I guess I would jump around a lot on stage and that, bring energy to it, but I was never trying to step on anybody's toes with slapping and trying to upstage anybody.
Do you still stand on your bass like occasionally?
Occasionally, yeah.
You do? Okay. Yeah, I still do it too. It's, I think it's a little cheesy, but I love it. I still do it. It's
yeah.
It's when I see all those guys like in the 50s doing it, I was like, all right, it's still fun. It's still fun.
Yeah.
When you toured, were you always using your basses, or you had to use like just a backline?
Always use my bass. One of the very first trips we did as a band was the city of Nashville sent us to Mexico to promote Nashville as a tourist destination. So we went to Cancun. It was beautiful. It was really great. They said, we've got your gear. It's all set up. You don't have to bring anything. And when I showed up to the show, it was a half-scale bass with
plastic strings.
I don't know what kind of strings it was, but it was like a toy kind of bass, and it was just ridiculous. And so from that experience, we did the show and it was okay, but it felt silly. From that experience, I was like, okay, I'm always going to bring my bass. And that wasn't always easy, but from then on, every time we traveled, I always had a bass. Now, one time, my bridge snapped, and I was in West Texas, and again, finding repair, it's one thing if you're in Nashville, there's people to work on instruments, but in the middle of nowhere, your hands are tied. So I had a broken bass, and we were going to Kerrville Folk Festival the next day, and Kevin Smith drove a bass out to me, and it was about 2.5 hours, I think, from Austin where he lived. And he showed up with a bass, and I used it for the gig, and he saved my butt that day, and so that was a big help. But then from Kerrville, then we came back to Nashville, and I was able to get it fixed. But that was the thing. I wasn't able to carry two basses with me. If one broke, I would always have an electric as a backup if an emergency if I needed it. But for the most part, just had the one bass. And if I broke a string, that was part of the show. We would the guys would have a certain song that they would go into that while I changed the string, I'd just change it as fast as I could. And we wouldn't. One time we were in Southern California, and Lee Rocker was there, and he was sitting right up front. And I broke a string, and I was, oh, what a night to break a string. But I just changed it right away and got right back up, and it was just kind of part of the show. We did it, on stage there, and I remember feeling bad about that. But after the show, Lee was like, "Oh, that was great." He said, he understood. That's part of the deal,
Oh yeah, absolutely. He is able to travel with two basses though. At least with with when he tours with the Cats. Huge shout out to Kevin Smith again, for helping out all of us on the road as well. Back then. Exactly. And so when you mentioned Mexico, I love Mexico. And I love playing in Mexico and really miss doing that. When you mentioned that small bass, was it one of those like Tololoche, like a Mexican mariachi basses, like not the real thing? Was one of those?
Yep. Yeah, it was. It was just
that.
It was just a disaster. Yeah.
Was it tuned at like normally, or you had to retune it?
I think it tuned up normal. I think so.
Oh, okay. Because sometimes they have like a different tuning, and it's even different, even more difficult.
Yeah.
I have some experience with the basses in Mexico, but at this point, I have a couple of friends that are down there, and then I usually use their basses when I'm not able to tour, especially if it's a fly out date or a weekend.
Right.
Do you have any special advice, like how to warm up before the show, or you just go and hit it?
Well, back when we were playing so much, we were just playing constantly, and whether it was down on Broadway where we were playing long shifts, it wasn't really an issue. It just was keeping my fingers going. As we traveled more, and that's in the mix. We were still doing radio stations every day and meet and greets and playing constantly, and still had our instruments around us constantly. So that wasn't really an issue. Now that I'm older and not on the road anymore, I do have to keep in shape and keep playing. Like I said, with this lockdown and everything, I just play in my front room for fun, and it's not the same as playing a gig in front of people or for dancers. But I don't have a routine, if that's what you're asking. I just do it.
That's I often do that. I'm thinking that I should warm up, but I usually just come backstage like 10 minutes before the downbeat and just go.
Yeah.
And I don't want to waste time when I tour, because there's like so many people that I want to meet and so many things that I want to see. So I'm just like, all right, this is the part that I have to do, and then all these other things that I want to do. So try to fit everything in these short 24 hours. is there anything that you would recommend, like for practicing on a daily basis to other bass players?
I just play along with records. That's my routine, was putting on records I love. I guess it helps if it's music and you listen to and you already know it. Like I said, it's fascinating to go out of your comfort zone and listen to other music. But as far as just practicing, rehearsing is, to me, is putting on music you love and trying to get in their mindset and figure out what they're doing.
Yeah, I love doing that. I think that's a great addition, like for whenever you want to practice and then make it a little bit more interesting than just doing scales and etudes and
sure,
little finger exercises, bow exercises, and all of that. And you said that you read music, right?
Yeah, not enough to hurt me, but yeah. But
okay, was that helpful, like in getting all these studio gigs?
Not typically, no.
No, okay.
Typically it's just charts. Typically it's just charts. But I do love when people play songs in off keys, especially if you're doing so much 1-4-5 stuff. If somebody comes in and says this song's in B flat, that's great. I love. I don't want to play all night in C, and so much of the walking stuff. It's important to me that like Gaibo talked about playing with a capo. That would be a real revelation if you use the capo in the upright bass. But going to different keys again makes you play a different bass line. If you take a song that you typically play in the same key over and over again and you switch keys, you're going to play a different bass line, and I like how that stretches things out and things come to the surface that way.
Absolutely. It's interesting since you mentioned B flat, which is kind of the most common key in jazz and swing, but like for country and rockabilly, you don't hear that often, except if there's maybe a saxophone or something like that, so that you kind of adjust. One thing that I want to ask you, I know you mentioned that you don't want to that you hurt yourself, so we unfortunately cannot hear you play. But one thing that I want to talk to you is about a slap-based terminology. Is there anything particular that you use, especially if you teach? Are you using that standard, like a single slap, double slap, triple slap type of thing, or you have your own lingo and terminology that you use?
Well, to me, the biggest breakthrough came from Kevin Smith when he talked about circles. And he talked about think circularly. Circularly, is that a word?
I think
meaning
so.
If you're playing and your energy is fighting itself, he said, think about this. And you've got a sphere almost. The circle this way, the circle this way. And the idea that you're exerting half of your energy because this is fighting itself. So that was a huge breakthrough for me in my playing, because so much of it is this, that the idea that, oh, do this. And you're cutting your energy in half that you're exerting. And so that was a very simple thing, but that opened a door in my brain that allowed me to do a whole lot more with my right hand. And so, especially playing long shifts, if you're playing all night and you're doing 6-7 hours on the bass, after a while. Now, it doesn't mean I never do this. I still can have some back and forth, but the allowing the longevity of the circles was a big breakthrough. So that's something that it's just a mindset. It's something it does change the way you play, but it allows you to have more endurance. And not everybody needs that. Not everybody is playing super long gigs, but if you are, that really did help. Playing through the pain, we talked about that, your right hand and the blistering and When I was playing the most, I would tape up my fingers, and I just learned that I needed to just play through it. There was no magic fix. There's no magic answer. But obviously, you build up the calluses and they get stronger. But that was a tough thing to fight through, as you know.
Absolutely. And as far as slap-based patterns that you use, would you say do you still call them like single slap, double slap, triple slap, or you have your own terminology for that?
Yeah, and I don't talk about it much, so I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't really say that. I mean, I know what you're saying. I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I don't find myself even really using those terms, but yeah, single slap, double slap, triple slap, and that's. But yeah, that's. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I'm trying like to figure out what is the best way like to explain and then maybe write down like so that future generations can have more of a structure that would kind of help more communication wise than just like insist like this way, this is the only way, because I don't believe in that. I believe there's like many different correct ways as long as it sounds good, as long as it has the pocket and the groove. So but I'm trying to figure out, to pick everyone's brain and then like figure out what is this something that it's more universal that could be used on a broader like for more different players, and that they have like certain structure that they can follow and achieve certain goals maybe faster.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating to think of not being able to see it. Now we have the benefit of YouTube and we can see people play. The idea that when they started rock and roll, the Crickets guys didn't have ways to see what Bill Black was doing, or they didn't have, they heard the recordings and, maybe they could get their head around it, but they certainly couldn't see what was happening. And we are spoiled in that regard that we can see lessons and we can see just footage of whether it's jazz guys or rock guys or bluegrass guys that we have access to it.
It's just amazing. Like you can find literally everything, but I still feel that as far as slap-based world, there's still ways to go. You can still develop the style and then find other people that are doing it, so that are which is, I guess, the reason why I created the Slapstream, so that I think it's very important to hear all these unique approaches to the genre. We've been talking like for more than 2 hours now, and I think that we covered pretty much everything that I wanted to ask you. And I have one more question, but before that, I would like to know, is there anything that you would like to mention that I might have skipped that you wanted to talk about?
Tell me, what was the first recording that you made? Was it in Serbia? Was it in America? Was the first recording session you got to do?
Oh, it was definitely in Serbia.
In Serbia? Yeah,
I was very active, like with since I started playing bass. Okay. I remember that the first recording I ever did was the Blue Sweat Shoes with my band when I was 13, I think.
Nice. And what was the band called?
Lonesome Train.
Oh, great. Right on.
A little rockabilly kids since we were 9 or 10, and then when I started playing bass when I was 12 or 13, and then practice, that was the first thing that I learned how to do.
Nice.
Blue Sweat Shoes. Still play it the same way.
Good. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that was the first one. Later on, but yeah, I did lots of actually recording sessions in Serbia, but it was some swing, some jazz, a little bit of rockabilly, some Balkan music, odd time signature music, a little bit of Arabic music. I had like one actually Sephardic band, and we played some Middle Eastern stuff, which was really helped me get into Makam world, and then quarter tones and all of that stuff. But at the same time, I was studying classical music. I was studying classical upright bass performance. So had to, practice Kusevitsky, Dittersdorf, and all of that stuff. So everything kind of came like in 10 years, I was like studying everything that I could hear. And at the same time, I was playing lots of gigs. Like for 1 year, I was playing like, for five gigs per week. And they were like, per week. And they were all like 5-6 hours long.
Yeah.
And that's how I got money like to move to the States. I think I mentioned
Oh,
that
good.
before. Yeah, but it was it was the turbulent times in Serbia back then. But cool. Thanks a lot. My last question is that I always ask my guests: what inspired you to still do what you do, to still play bass, to still play music, to still want to do sessions and shows? And your life is music, even with your museum job, but everything is surrounded. What inspires you, and what makes you excited after all these years?
Well, it's the excitement of discovery. We're still discovering new things, whether it's current or old music, new things that turn us on. I say us, as human beings. As a child, you start discovering that there's a lot of different types of music. You find yourself relating to certain types more than others. You find things that excite you, and then you discover what influenced that, and you go backwards. Again, new music comes along that turns me on, and I get excited by it. My kids now are old enough that they turn me on to things that they're listening to. They are discovering older music that they're excited by, and I can hear it through their ears, if you will. But something that I grew up not even giving a second thought to, and my son will hear it and Dad, check this out, and it'll make me appreciate it in a new way. Some new music that I've never even imagined or thought about, and my kids are listening to it, and it makes me give it a little more of a listen. And again, finding older music that I didn't know existed. There are so many records out there and so many recordings that are inspiring and mean a lot to me. I'm fascinated by context in music. You can hear a song and it means nothing to you. It goes right past you. And then you can learn something about that song, where it was recorded, how it was written, what was used that was unique in the recording of it. And then you hear the exact same piece of music that you heard a week ago, but with that context, it reaches you, and oh, I like that song. That's interesting. That guy wrote that because of something he was going through, or this woman was living this situation, and it makes us appreciate the music. And that blows me away, that I heard that same song a week ago, meant nothing to me. Then I learned something about it. Now it means something to me. And I'm constantly discovering music in that context. So that drives me to do what I do. I love working at the museum, learning more about music, meeting the people that made it. I love the fact that a song can mean something so personal to us, and it's cinematic, and I close my eyes and I see a cowboy riding through the desert, and it's bigger than life, and it's conjures up all these images. And then I meet the guy who played guitar on it, and I want to know about what was it like to be in the studio that day. His recollection may be that it was a Tuesday morning and he was hungover, and he was in this dumpy little dingy studio, and it wasn't glamorous, and his wife was nagging him, and it's not what we build it up to be in our brains, and the magic that we hear. It's fascinating to hear some of the behind the scenes things, and some of the happy accidents that happen in recording that turns into what can change our lives. Music changes our lives, and that is beautiful.
Absolutely. I love listening. Your stories and reading your stories, and I would like to thank you for being a part of the Slapstream, for sharing all this knowledge and the experience. And then I'm sure that this episode gonna inspire lots of bass players like in the future. And thanks for joining us here in Slapsville, and I hope to hear you and see you play live sometime soon.
Yes, well, it's my pleasure to be here. Keep doing what you're doing. It's very important. And I sure enjoy watching the old shows, and I look forward to the new ones. So keep it up, Djordje. My pleasure, and I can't wait for you to come to Nashville.
Me too. Thanks again, and good luck with everything.
Thank you, man. Bye-bye.
All right. That was another amazing slap stream with Djordje live from Slapsville. Today with SMILIN Jay McDowell. And I would like to thank all of you for being with us, like through over 2 hours and 15 minutes. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to slap that like button. Leave a comment if you have somebody in particular in mind that you would like me to feature. Lots of bass players that don't get a chance to be interviewed that often accepted my invite, and they share their knowledge. And I would like to document everyone that want to share their expertise with us on slap bass and bass in general. If you'd like to support my work, please check out Patreon. It's in the description of this video if you'd like to donate and help me out continue doing this. And I'll do it as long as I can, as long as possible, as long as you like it and you want to listen to it. So check out Venmo and PayPal links below. And don't forget to follow SMILIN Jay. Don't forget to follow me. And don't forget to follow Art of Slap Bass. All these links are in the description of this video. And don't forget, never fret, slide it in smooth, and keep it in the groove. I'm Djordje, and I will see you next Saturday.